The UK's Labour Party has come to power in a world teeming with political, military and climate threats. So, what could this new government's foreign policy actually look like? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, over the last decade, the UK has left the EU. Two major wars are raging, and one of them is on its own doorstep. The Labour Party has been given a strong mandate to rebuild the country, but the UK is no longer the global force it once was. So, what must Britain do to ensure its security?
A seismic political shift in the UK as the centre-left Labour Party sweeps to power, delivering a crushing blow to the Conservatives, their worst defeat in British parliamentary history.
We did it! You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
Starmer had campaigned on a platform of change, promising to mend a broken Britain after 14 years of Conservative rule. True to his word, he set to work immediately. Newly appointed Foreign Secretary David Lammy has too, saying he wants to reset some of the UK's foreign policy strands. That's no surprise after Labour lost 5 seats to pro-Palestinian independent candidates. The party's initial refusal to press harder for a ceasefire in Gaza cost it votes in areas with large Muslim populations.
Let's be clear that the time has come for the United Kingdom to reconnect with the outside world, and we have been very clear on that in the British Labour Party. I want to get back to a balanced position on Israel, Gaza. The fighting has to stop. The aid has got to get in.
In its manifesto, Labour promised that the UK will remain part of the European Convention of Human Rights. But it won't seek a return to the EU single market or customs union, even though Labour wants to break down what it calls unnecessary barriers with the UK's largest trading partner.
I want to see a reset on Europe, a reset on our relationships with the Global South, and a reset on climate. And I also want to see some gear shifts on European security and on global security, given all the problems that we're seeing in the Middle East.
After the UK's exit from the EU, its special relationship with the US has taken on greater significance, something Starmer wasted no time in cementing.
Mr. Prime Minister, congratulations. What a hell of a victory. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Lammy also wants a rethink of the UK's ties with China. So far, he's packed in a lot. He's met the leaders of Germany, Poland and Sweden in his first few days. And Starmer's government has announced a new military aid package for Ukraine, just before he attends a NATO summit in Washington. The war is likely to be top of the agenda at the meeting and a dominant feature of the new UK government's foreign policy.
Let's bring in our guests. Claire Pearsall is a former special advisor to the UK Home Office and a former advisor to Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May. Claire joins us from Istanbul. In Dewsbury in the UK is Ammar Anwar. He's an independent councillor who quit the Labour Party over its stance on Gaza. And here with me in the studio is Scarlett MccGwire. She is a former Labour Party advisor. Scarlett, I'll come to you first. What do you think should be the priority for Keir Starmer now that he is British Prime Minister?
Well, as far as foreign affairs goes, it has to be Gaza, because that's where he really differs from the Conservatives. I mean, one is he's going for a ceasefire. Some of us say at long last, and the other is that the Conservatives were challenging the International Court, the International Criminal Court, on Netanyahu, and Keir has withdrawn that challenge, saying that if this is what the ICC wants to do, this is what they will do. So it's different. It's the right thing to do, but it's also politically the right thing to do because of the feeling in Britain. And it's not just among Muslims. There are a lot of people in Britain who feel that we got Gaza wrong.
And you feel he will do this? He will be very different on Gaza?
Well, he's already said that he will recognise that he hasn't just said, I will recognise Palestine as a state. He said, it must be recognised. We must have a ceasefire. So how much sway Britain has with Netanyahu when we've seen him ignore President Biden is another matter. But it's absolutely right that Keir Starmer says, this is what Britain thinks. This is our way forward. And it is very, very different from the Conservatives.
Ammar, I want to come to you on the issue of Gaza. You quit Labour because of its previous stance. Do you think Starmer will do enough now on Gaza for someone with your viewpoint to come back into the Labour fold?
I mean, as we've seen on July the 4th election results, Keir Starmer did lose approximately nearly 3.5 million Muslim vote out of the possible 4.3 million that Jeremy Corbyn achieved in 2019. And as in Dewsbury and Batley, we achieved an independent MP as well as the council is independent as well now. So I think to regain the trust of the Muslims, Keir Starmer has to go beyond and above. I seen his statement yesterday that he made regarding Palestine recognising it and also acting for an immediate ceasefire. But the question still remains, when you was in opposition, why didn't you do it then? Why did I have to be forced to leave the Labour Party that I loved, under your leadership? So there are questions remaining there for him. And I don't think the Muslim vote in Britain has faith in Keir Starmer's leadership for the likes of Kashmir and Palestine. I think it's a key issue for the Muslim residents of Britain, Kashmir and Palestine. And I think Keir Starmer needs to do a lot more than just give a few TV interviews to persuade the Muslim vote back to the Labour Party.
Ammar, just tell me, how much anger is there still in the Muslim community in the UK then with Keir Starmer and Labour over Gaza?
I think the anger is still there. I mean, people on social media since yesterday have been sharing Keir Starmer's interview where he's stating that Palestine must be recognised. Netanyahu and the Israeli government must call an immediate ceasefire. But the question they're also asking in the comment section is, why couldn't Keir Starmer do it when he was in the opposition? Why did he have to wait till he came into government? And seeing the election result that his party has suffered, it is a landslide victory, no doubt about it. But like I've stated, Jeremy Corbyn achieved more votes in 2017 and in 2019 than the landslide of 2024.
Claire, I'll come to you. Do you think Starmer will be very different on Gaza than to Sunak and Johnson and Truss?
No, I think he's going to also run into some difficulties, because as we've just heard, the Muslim community feel incredibly let down because whilst Keir Starmer was opposition leader, his messaging was very different. And it just seems that he's been handed the keys to number 10. And all of a sudden, he's coming up with a consistent line on what he's going to do. But it almost feels a little bit too late. And people may not like the Conservative Party and their stance on it, but the very thing that they were was consistent. And I think that goes a long way when you're looking at these kind of issues. But the Muslim population in the UK are looking at Keir Starmer saying, you've let us down so badly, why should we trust you? And I feel that these words just aren't enough. And it feels a little bit like grandstanding just to get a message over.
Scarlett, the other big conflict, of course, is Ukraine. The UK's backing and support for Ukraine obviously will remain. How do you think he will approach that conflict compared to the Conservatives?
I think there'll be no difference. I mean, I think that's what he went over and said to Zelensky. Before the election, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, went over immediately after the election to reassure Zelensky that actually there would be no change, that the relationship with NATO would be no change, and I think it's really, really important for NATO, for the Ukrainians, and frankly for Russia, that they understand that it's as if there was no change of government as far as Ukraine goes.
And that's very, very important for the Ukrainians to know that they will always have the support of the United Kingdom.
It's very important. How can you plan? Because particularly when you've got possibly Trump getting into the White House and everything suddenly being thrown up in the air and you not knowing what's going to happen.
Well, Scarlett, you mentioned John Healey. He is the UK's new Defence Secretary. Within 24 to 48 hours of his appointment, he had announced a new package of support for Ukraine. Let's take a look at it. So this package will contain 250,000 rounds of 50 calibre ammunition, 90 anti-armour Brimstone missiles, 50 small military boats to support river and coastal operations. Also included are 40 demining vehicles, 10 AS-90 artillery guns, howitzers, and 61 bulldozers to help build defensive positions. Ammar, it's an impressive package again from the UK in terms of supporting Ukraine. How do you feel the British population and public is behind the UK's support of Ukraine? Do you feel it's wavering a bit, or are people getting fatigue?
I mean, it's been ongoing for so long now, the Ukrainian conflict. And in previous governments, we've seen British aid going abroad in conflict zones that shouldn't be going abroad and that should be spent on the British public. While British people are suffering, since 2010, 32 million food bank users. That's nearly half the British population. I mean, if we've got money to fund wars and aid other countries, we should start thinking about British people first and putting them first. Because of this aid that's going abroad, you've got reform on the rise that has damaged the Conservative Party. But let's not just look at the damage they've done to the Conservative Party, but also the Labour Party. A lot of Labour Party voters are voting reform. So to tackle these kind of crises, you should be putting Britain first instead of pumping billions in weaponry and missiles and bullets into war zones that we have really no business to be in. I mean, even Israeli arms that we're selling to Israel as well, that needs to stop as well. I think that's another thing Keir Starmer should do to tackle the issue of regaining the trust of the Muslim vote.
Claire, I'm sure you want to come in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Keir Starmer is right to keep the line of protecting what we can of Ukraine. He's done that in opposition. He has supported the government at every turn with the war effort there. And I think it's only the right thing to do. And I think Scarlett is right. Is the rest of the world are going to be looking at what the United Kingdom does when you have a change of government. And to have that strong, consistent message is incredibly important. You can't let Putin take another inch, because that does affect people in the EU and into the UK. And if life is bad in some places now, if there was an all-out war, it would be discernibly worse. So we need to keep that line. And also just to reiterate on the line of arms to Israel, it doesn't particularly matter if we stopped. It isn't going to make a fundamental difference if we stop selling arms to Israel, because the amount that we send is negligible. But I can appreciate that it would send a strong message, but it doesn't have the effect that people wish it would. So I think at the moment we just have to look at the legalities of it, look at what is going on, and work with Netanyahu and his administration to see if that ceasefire can be brought to the front.
Scarlett, I want to talk about European relations, EU in particular. For years and years, we had this constant battle, it seemed, between London and various different European capitals. And ultimately, Brexit happened, and whether that was the right thing or not, time will tell. Doesn't certainly look to be good. Can Starmer rebuild Britain's reputation in Europe?
We have to hope so. I mean, it's really, really important for our future that we're not a little island off Europe with nothing else, that we actually do have relations with Europe. Now, he's not going to go back into the EU. There's absolutely no question about it. What he does at the beginning of a second term might be different, but certainly for the foreseeable future, we're not there. But we need to have proper relations. And it partly depends, of course, on France and Germany and what they're going to say to us. But you know, I mean, one of the first things that he's got to do is that in October we're supposed to have all these customs things, which is going to cost Britain an awful lot of money, and whether he can push once again the can down the road so that we can not do it while he negotiates a softer Brexit would be very important.
And just tell me, where do you genuinely feel relations are with Europe now? Are they the lowest they've ever been in your lifetime?
I think they were the lowest. I'm hoping since July the 4th that things will change. And he has been over to Brussels quite a lot as opposition leader to say, look, if when I get in, things will change. I mean, he's certainly been doing an awful lot on the European stage to prepare for this because I mean, he was a Remainer, but more important is he really, really believed in our ties with Europe, in particular security, actually. And that's where, I mean, he could not believe what we were doing to break our ties with Europe on things that were just, that didn't make a difference to the British people, but actually gave a terrible message to Europe.
And weakened the UK.
Absolutely weakened the UK.
Yeah. Ammar, would you like to see the British government now have closer ties to Europe?
Definitely, I believe the referendum was solid enough to the British public to make a decision on whether to remain or leave. I mean, if you look at working class towns around Britain, majority of them voted leave. And I've been on the campaign trail for over 3-4 months now. And every person that I speak to about Brexit that voted leave, they say if we had the option to remain, we would remain. So I do believe Keir Starmer should re-enter us into the single market for businesses. And I think a lot of people that voted leave was down to immigration. They didn't have a proper understanding what other benefits or losses we would have if we actually left the EU. I think Keir Starmer has 5 years to prove himself what we can get out of the EU as trade, as business, and as migration as well. And I believe that he will have a good opportunity to do that. I do think he's the best person for the job to get us back into the EU somehow. Not rejoining, but get the best benefits from both sides, what Britain can give to the EU and what the EU can give to Britain. I think that's the way we should go forward.
Claire, a lot of people would say Starmer's picking up a very broken relationship because of years of Conservative antagonism towards Europe.
I mean, I think it's very easy for people to say that, but we have to remember that over 17 million people voted to leave. And they did so for a number of reasons. It's not just down to immigration, it's also down to sovereignty, wanting to protect borders, wanting to have their say on how the money is spent. And whatever reason people give, it shouldn't be laughed at and it shouldn't be put to one side and said it was a rubbish idea. So I feel very concerned that we're looking at perhaps a softer Brexit, closer ties with the EU, when that isn't what the country wished to happen. So I think this is a really dangerous position for Starmer to go too strong on, because there will be a backlash of those areas who very heavily voted to leave the EU. And it's always been a concern of the Conservative Party that this would happen and Keir Starmer would come in and look to rejoin the EU. Now, I'm not suggesting that he's going to do that, but it has been a very, very fragile relationship ever since the 2016 referendum. Some of it is down to Conservative administration. Some of it is down to the EU just saying, OK, we've had enough. So I think that we need to find some common ground, especially on things like security. That is of vital importance. But I think we need to be extremely careful about giving too much away now that we have got a different government. I don't want there to be a lessening of Brexit just because it feels politically advantageous for Starmer to do so.
Scarlett, no conversation about foreign policy can be complete without China.
Yes, but first of all, can I say that most people did not vote for a hard Brexit.
True.
I mean, you know, we don't know what sort of Brexit they voted for. And to say that Keir wants
I'm not sure they knew, to be fair.
Well, no, I think most of us had no idea of all the things. But I think to say that Keir softening Brexit goes against the referendum is wrong. China. OK, so what they want to do is it's the 3 Cs. They want to compete on economic grounds. They want to challenge on human rights, because, I mean, there is a real problem with human rights in China. And they want to collaborate on things like green issues. And they certainly can, because, I mean, if you look at how many Chinese people come over to university, I mean, they, frankly, keep our universities going
Because
at the
they pay
moment.
more.
Oh, because
They
they
pay
pay
way
a
more.
lot of
Yeah.
money. Yeah. No. The rich Chinese students coming over here are great. But I mean, that's what... So we need to have a very nuanced relationship with China, not a, this is a bad country, we're not going to have anything to do with it. But actually, there's good and bad, and that's what we have to deal with.
Ammar, would you like to see a better relationship with the Chinese? I mean, it's certainly to Britain's economic benefit.
Most definitely, I think China is the next #1 superpower in the world. I mean, I've been over to Pakistan on many occasions in the last few years. I've seen the CPEC deal they have in place there, and they're developing Pakistan. They've pumped billions of dollars into third world countries and going into partnerships through energy reform, through trade deals, through road links, through ports as well. And I think Britain needs to put Britain first and go where the benefit is. As far as it concerns human rights, I mean, human rights are abused by nearly every country in the world. I mean, look at Saudi Arabia, the brutality that goes on there. They're not questioned, but we have a perfect relationship with them. So I don't see a problem in going to working with China and developing better ties and hopefully financial benefits for Britain.
Claire, your take on where the relationship with China will go under Starmer?
I think that he needs to be incredibly cautious, and human rights issues are well known, and especially the treatment of Hong Kong nationals who have come to the UK to remove themselves from the Chinese government's grips. I think that needs to be questioned a lot more. Treatment of the Uyghur population also needs to continue to be challenged. So I think that we cannot be too friendly. We cannot be too close with China. We absolutely need to challenge that behaviour. But I think that we could perhaps learn something from them in the green agenda. But I'm just really, really cautious, given the history that we have with China and almost that abuse of it with security concerns, infrastructure security and things like that. So I don't think that he needs to rush this. It's not a decision that he needs to take now or even lightly. And a lot more information needs to come through before he finally decides what kind of relationship that's going to be.
Scarlett, there is, of course, the special relationship, as the Brits call it, with the United States. One man who may be president in a 2.0 running, Donald Trump. You couldn't pick two more different fellas, could you? Keir Starmer and Donald Trump.
I know, and it is being said, can I say wrongly, that if Donald Trump was to be elected, he would only deal with Nigel Farage and he would not deal with Keir Starmer. Whatever we might think of Donald Trump, he's a realist. Also, apparently, he's very impressed that it's Sir Keir Starmer, and he likes it. It's going to be tough. If Donald Trump becomes president, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough across the world, right? But it is very important. It's a democratic country. If he wins a democratic election, we have to deal with Donald Trump.
Claire, I just want to come to you on the Trump issue. How can you see Keir Starmer and Donald Trump rubbing along together as president and prime minister, if it comes to it?
I think it's going to be quite an uncomfortable relationship. He's not a natural companion of Sir Keir Starmer, but as Scarlett has just said, if you are a democratically elected leader, then you have to work with other democratically elected leaders across the world. You don't really have a choice about that. I think it is going to be really tricky. It's going to be quite interesting to watch. Not that natural union between, say, Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, where you could see the affinity, but it's going to have to be ironed out. And perhaps this will put a little bit of the brakes on some of Donald Trump's more wild behaviour should he become president, by having that more sensible reaction from Sir Keir Starmer.
Ammar, it will certainly be a very unusual relationship to watch if it comes to it.
Definitely, I think it's going to be a fun one to watch, because Donald Trump is really out there in the world. He doesn't hold back, and I think maybe Keir Starmer can learn a lot of things off Donald Trump, at least how to be straightforward and answer the question instead of beating around the bush. So it will be interesting one to watch, certainly.
Scarlett, just back to you. Just to summarise, he's got a very busy few months ahead, foreign policy-wise.
Very busy, very busy, and this is just what he's got at the moment. We don't know what's coming down the track. I mean, that's the problem with foreign policy is you don't know what happens next. He obviously trusts David Lammy. There was a lot of briefings against Lammy during the election. He's kept David Lammy. He believes in him. I think that they'll go forward with John Healey as the Defence Secretary as a triumvirate. They will be very effective.
Are you confident that Starmer will start rebuilding Britain's place in the world? Because year on year, whether people like it or not, it has diminished.
Oh, it has certainly diminished, and he believes in it. But he also believes that Britain should be a country that obeys international law. And that's where we were failing. So, yes, he wants to improve foreign relations, but he also wants to have us as a beacon of light, actually, and not one that we're talking about leaving, the European Court of Human Rights and things like that. He is an international lawyer. He really, really believes that our place is at the high table.
Ammar, thank you, and to Claire in Istanbul as well, and Scarlett here in the studio. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World, and if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.